Hello friends, welcome to the fantabulous world of stories and why we tell them from Kulture Katha. It's been a while since we left the story of the epic with the birth of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Pandavas, as you may remember, were born to Kunti and Madri in the forest with the blessings of the gods, the Devatas. And the Kauravas were born to Gandhari and Dhritarashtra with help from sage Vedavyasa. You may also remember how Pandu, while hunting, accidentally killed a sage who had taken the form of a deer for mating, and how the dying sage had cursed Pandu that he would never be able to have sex with a woman again, and if he tried to, he would die that very instant. Saddened by the curse, Pandu decided to hand over the reins of Hastinapura to his brother Dhritarashtra and retire to the forests to live the life of a recluse. His wives joined him, and it was later with the help of Kunti and her mantra given by sage Durvasa, the Pandavas were born. You know all the story. Even after the birth of the Pandavas, Pandu's family continued to live on in the forests. A few years passed. One day, Pandu happened to find himself alone in the forest with Madri, his younger wife. As fate would have it, that day, his base desires got the better of him. Forgetting the curse on his head, Pandu tried to force himself on Madri. Before Madri even realized what was happening, Pandu's curse played out and he died tragically. Pandu's life story is a classic illustration of the karma theory. One can never escape the fruits of one's own action. The epic itself tells us very little about Pandu, but we can find many interesting layers to his story if we, so to say, read between the lines. One interesting aspect that comes out is how Pandu's life has some interesting parallels with the life story of Bhishma, his uncle. Both of them are forced to give up the throne or their claim to sovereignty when young. While Bhishma is forced to abdicate his kingship to fulfill his father's desire to marry Satyavati, Pandu is forced to relinquish his throne because the deer's curse would never allow him to become a father and bear a successor for the throne. Again, both Pandu and Bhishma are forced to give up their sex life. Bhishma, after he swears to a strict vow of celibacy as part of his promise to Satyavati's father, and Pandu because of the dying deer's curse. Both men are thus forced to lose their social status as well as their manhood and the right to have their basic human needs satisfied. The similarities are not just restricted to the stories of Pandu and Bhishma. These kind of parallels occur frequently in the epic. A.K. Ramanujan, a renowned scholar, poet and literature, points to several of these. Childlessness or heirlessness, for one, is a repeating theme in the epic. The core story of the epic starts with Satyavati tackling a succession issue. Her two sons from Shantanu die childless. It is through Niyoga that Pandu and Dhritarashtra are born. Pandu too is unable to have father children and is forced to resort to some alternative means to have them. Dhritarashtra's children, the Kauravas, as we have seen, also do not have a normal birth. In fact, Gandhari, after bearing what she thought was the fetus for almost 2 years, delivered only a dead lump of flesh. It was Vyasa who magically breathed life into it. In keeping with this theme, the core story of the epic ends with the succession crisis. The death of all the Kauravas and the children of the Pandavas in the war once again poses the challenge of succession for the surviving Pandavas. Who would become king after Yudhishthira? Thankfully, due to Krishna's timely intervention, the fetus born by Abhimanyu's wife Uttara is saved. The unborn child, who later becomes Parikshit, also the grandson of Arjuna, later goes on to inherit the throne after Yudhishthira. Mothers killing or abandoning the children is another thread that repeats in the Adi Parvan of the epic. Kunti abandons Karna as an infant, and river Ganga, as we know, throws away 7 of her children into the river immediately after their birth. The other repetition we see is how in the stories of Shantanu and Yayati, which we have seen in detail in one of my previous videos, Both their sons, namely Bhishma and Puru, give up their youth and all the pleasures that come with it in order to fulfill the somewhat unfair expectations of their fathers. Ramanujan once again points out yet another interesting pattern of dual spouses in the epic. Dual spouses as in one normal, one divine spouse that gets thrown up across the epic. For instance, Shantanu has two wives, Satyavati, a normal human, and the river goddess Ganga, the celestial spouse. Satyavati too had two men in her life, the otherworldly sage Parashara and a normal human being, King Shantanu. I could go on and on with the list, but I wanted to stick largely to the recurring patterns emerging from the story we have seen so far. So friends, the question to ask is, why do events and patterns repeat in the epic? Sociologically speaking, repetition of events was probably integral to a small clan-based society, such as the one that features in the epic. But I think the idea itself comes from the fact that Indians saw life itself as a repetitive occurrence of events. Just as they believed that their dead ancestors came back to the family as newborns, or that the son was only an image of the father, they believed in recurring patterns in other aspects of life too. The root to this idea probably lay in the cyclicality of the cosmic phenomenon they observed all around them. The sun rising and setting every day, the phases of the moon that recurred every month, and the cyclicality of seasons. They saw themselves as an integral part of this universe where everything tended to recur, to repeat. In their worldview, there was a certain rhythm to human life. There was birth, death, and rebirth. These ideas in turn led to the ideas of karma and samsara. As we proceed with the epic, you will find out how the concept of karma plays out all through the epic and how each character eventually gets what he or she deserves, including the god himself. Friends, the Mahabharata is an ocean. If you dare to dive deep, you will find many such interesting patterns emerge as we proceed with the story. So take a plunge with me on this epic journey as we discover more and more pearls. Till we meet again, it's Tada, bye bye. Take care.